Okay, we are now officially live.
Okay, hello everyone and Soti. Welcome to our weekly online Dhamma group where we study together with Venerable Dhamma and the Sri Mangalo online community, Buddhist texts, and we're currently studying the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta commentary by the late Venerable Mahasi Sayadaw. And Venerable Dhamma is joining us from Sri Lanka at the meditation center. So if you're interested in doing a course with us for free, everything is for free, then feel free to initiate it and contact us. Before we start today's session, we will begin by taking refuge in the Triple Gem and accept the 5 precepts together. We do this every week to prepare us for the study group and to remind ourselves of the moral basics for practicing the Buddha's teaching. And even if you're new, or whether you're new or you are someone who keeps them, you are both welcome to recite with us, because it's always good to put it in front of you of what good deeds you're actually doing. It's a very, very special thing, I would say, to keep the 5 precepts. Is there someone in the Discord reading group who would like to lead the recitation today?
I would like to.
Okay, thank you, Sanna. If you're ready, you can start.
Ahang bante tisaranena saha pancha silani yachami. Dutiyampi ahang bante tisaranena saha pancha silani yachami. Tatiyampi ahang bante tisaranena saha pancha silani yachami.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Buddhang saranang gacchami.
Buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dhammang saranang gacchami.
Sanghang saranang gacchami.
Sanghang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Isarana-gamanang nititang
Amabante.
Arnatipata viramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Panatipata Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
Adinna Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
Adinna Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
Amesu Michachara Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
Kamesu Michachara Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
Musavada Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
Musavada Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
Surameraya Majjapamadatthana Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
Sura Meraya Madha Pamadatana Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
Imani Pancha Sikkhapadani Silena Sugating Yanti Silena Bhoga Sampada Silena Nibbuteng Yanti Tasma Silang Visodhaye.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Maybe I can try to show the reading so you don't have to switch between the screens.
Okay. Thank you. Let me know if you're not able to.
Just have to find the page. But we will now begin with the reading, and the reading list is posted by Martin. Thank you, Martin. We are currently at page 158 of the PDF. Okay, then I'm on the right page. And this craving for non-existence likes the idea. Let me search for it. Okay. So the last reader was Shibitsu. I'm just thinking if I forgot something. Yeah, maybe I can say something for the reading. So if you are under of the reading group, please send us a request, and you just have to have done at least the at-home course. Then you can also take part in the reading groups. We read about 2 paragraphs. If they're very short, you can read more. And please take your time when reading. Read slowly, carefully, and leave a pause between the paragraphs. So there's time for questions or explanations by the Venerable Yuttadhammo. And yes, otherwise, the next person after Subitsu would be Austin. Austin, if you're ready, you may start.
Yes. This craving for non-existence likes the idea that after death, existence is annihilated without any special effort. The reason is that one who holds this view shrinks from the practice of meritorious deeds and does not abstain from doing evil deeds. The evil deeds committed are also innumerable. If new life occurs after death, these evil deeds will bear unwholesome fruits, which, of course, they cannot relish. Only if nothing happens after death and there is no new existence, their misdeeds will be expunged. They will have to bear no responsibility for them and escape scot-free from the consequences of their evil actions. Hence, the great appeal of this ideology.
So just for the regular recap, we are on the truth of the origin of suffering, which is that the truth of suffering originates, or the reality of suffering originates from tanha. And there are three kinds of tanha, or craving. Craving for sensuality, craving for becoming, and craving for non-becoming. And now we're talking about craving for non-becoming. So this is often flipped on its head, this idea where people who follow this sort of ideology will accuse Buddhists of seeking out some kind of comfort in the idea that there is some justice in the afterlife. It seems more scientific, I suppose, or more cold, calculated, rational, to think that there is no justice, right? I mean, karma does sound kind of too good to be true, like a wishful thinking. We all wish that the bad people would get their just desserts, just rewards, get what's coming to them, and we wish that good people didn't suffer. It would be such a great thing, right? But so it sounds like wishful thinking, because we all wish for justice and we wish for injustice to end. But because we can't see very far into the future, or really very, very deeply into the present, it seems like there's not really any evidence that we can find for it. So the people will off at the idea to say, no, it's nature's not like that. That's not just. Nature is cruel. Nature doesn't care, right? Nature doesn't have any justice. But at the same time, these people will talk about cause and effect on the physical side. So they'll say, on the physical side, everything is cause and effect. Causality is everything, right? Without a cause, you don't have the result. And they'll talk about experiments, and they'll be able to show how this cause leads to that result, and they'll show evidence, and they'll create theories. And it's very reasonable and very rational to think that everything is cause and effect. And then it just all goes out the window when you talk about the mind, because what? Because the mind is, I don't know, not real. I mean, the truth is that such people are just simply lacking in mental clarity. So there's no clear explanation of how the mind works. And there's no ability to see that, in fact, the mind is a part of this causal relationship. And that's significant because suffering is also a part of that causal framework. Now, this is where it gets into the realm of ridicule, where people will talk about suffering as though it's meaningless, happiness as though it's meaningless, because it's subjective. It's not objective. It's not a part of this rational, cold, calculated, scientific outlook. And yet, how could it not be? Either it's not real, or it's absolutely a part of this cold, calculated, scientific framework, suffering and happiness and everything that goes along with that. The badness of suffering, the goodness of happiness are a part of this scientific framework. Happiness is to be sought. Suffering is to be freed from. And because they're a part truly of this scientific framework, it's absolutely reasonable, rational, and logical to conclude that do bad, get bad, do good, get good. There is consequences to one's actions. And the idea that it somehow just magically disappears into the ether when you die is short-sighted, narrow-minded, and based on a lack of clarity, or more often wrong view. Not even looking because you've already decided what is the truth.
At the same time, holding that the time for enjoying is now, the present life before death, they are too eager to pursue any desirable objects of pleasure. Consequently, they go all out in the pursuit of what they consider to be pleasurable. This ardent pursuit of pleasure leads to commission of kamma and mental formations, every act of which is contributing to formation of new life.
Dhamma really is mental formations. You'd have to look at the Burmese to see exactly what he's saying. And of course, this isn't a talk, so exactly what words he used, I wouldn't read too much into it. It's really just you can separate the mental formations being the actual truth of kamma, the law of kamma in Buddhism as being the state of mind, is karmically potent. But kamma can also refer to the actions that result from that, the things you say, the things you do. So the commission of actions based on that mental karma.
Every time there is delight in and enjoyment of pleasures of the present life, the impulse of craving is imparted to the stream of consciousness. Consequently, impulsion proximate to death, otherwise called the kamma-forming consciousness, abhisankara vijnana, clings to the death signs. Kamma, sign of karma, and sign of destiny. While clinging to these objects, when the death follows the deceased consciousness, rebirth consciousness arises for a new existence, conditioned by one of the three signs. Thus, a person holding the annihilationist view is reborn whether he or she likes it or not in a new existence, because of craving for pleasurable objects. This new existence is very likely to be in inferior and miserable states, because he or she had developed nothing but evil deeds previously.
Yeah, what nature and reality don't care about at all is your views. So any statement that starts with "I believe" is meaningless. It has no meaning to it, has no value. Simply saying "I believe." Sorry, it has value in terms of how it changes you. Your beliefs change you. It has no impact on reality. No matter how loud you shout, I believe, it doesn't change, it doesn't have any effect except for the result of noise if you shout it. But it has no effect on reality to believe something to be true or to be false.
The Buddha taught, therefore, that this type of craving for non-existence also gives rise to new existence. Thus, all the three types of craving, sensual craving, craving for existence, and craving for non-existence, lead to new life and suffering. Therefore, I have summarized. The true cause of suffering is the three types of craving.
There's something about the views. One thing that causes a lot of annihilationist views, because this, I talk about this because it's such a common thing, right? In modern times, this is the big one. The ideas of the afterlife is common, but only in religious circles, which is, I don't think, that big of a deal in modern times, not in most of the world. Eternalists are those who believe when you die you go to heaven, or the Hindus who believe that your soul continues on for eternity, or this, well, some Hindu philosophies. But the annihilationist view, it comes a lot from the lack of ability to see. Sorry, the belief that you can't see clearly, that you can't pay attention to reality and discern anything about the afterlife, about what comes after. And so the realm for ordinary people of what is true is limited to that which can be experimented on physically, i.e. the physical body. So you can look at the body, you can look at the brain, you can see it all stop, and that's as far as you can go. And with the view, with the belief that that's all there is, that's the only place you can look. There arises this view that there's nothing else, because there's no realm that you could look at to find something else. The mind is for these people, a red herring. It has no fruit. There's no fruit in looking at the mind, no fruit to be found in observing the mind. And so the result of this, I mean, there is this view that when we die, there's nothing. But a result of not looking at the mind, or not believing that you could look at the mind, is not just not seeing the truth, right? Buddhists will say, well, if you look at the mind, you will see that the truth, that the mind is very much bound by laws of cause and effect. But not only will you not see the truth, more deeply, you will not see clearly. And so it's not just that people who have this annihilation view are looking in the wrong place and looking and saying, oh, the body is dead, this person has died, that's it for them. It's also that they're unable to see clearly about that view either. They're unable to see clearly that, well, the brain doesn't exist, the body, I mean, these are just conceptual things that arise in our mind. So it's not what I'm trying to say is it's not an equal footing. It's not either you believe in materialism, that there's physicalism, that there's nothing after death, and that there's only the physical body, or you believe in the mind and the efficacy of the mind. They're not equal footing. Without looking at the mind, you can't even see clearly. Your mind is muddled. Your mind is clouded. Your mind is partial, biased. And so it is a useful, a powerful argument to remind us all that without mental development, without the practice of sharpening the mind, you can't even make an informed decision. You can't say, I'm just as justified to take this view about physicalism, that there's only the body. You're not, because you've never trained your mind to have the sharpness to see clearly. There is a lack of training in the mind, and you'll see this with people who are, even brilliant scientists, that their minds are polluted, their minds are clouded. Talk to people who are ardent physicalists. They're not very nice people. I mean, they're lacking. There's a lack of mental fortitude. I guess the point I'm saying is, don't be quick to choose sides, even the Buddhist side, As always, the most important thing is to strengthen your mind, sharpen your mind to be able to see clearly. But the only way to truly come to the truth is through training the mind, and so right away you've already stepped into the realm of mental causality. You've already stepped across this line of just believing that it's all physical and the mind is meaningless, or the mind is nothing, the mind is just a byproduct or something like that.
Andy, may I please ask a question? It's related to the craving for non-existence. So let's say if one has been meditating and then comes to understands that there's no point of, there's no purpose in becoming a new life, and that person sees the three characteristics and doesn't want to be reborn in another life. Is it also the same as craving for non-existence, or is it a different thing? Thank you, Bandi.
So what you're talking about is kind of vague, I guess. I mean, the simple answer is craving is moments, and what you're describing probably has lots of different kinds of moments. Some of those moments might be craving for, yearning for non-existence. But the distinction is, there is a distinction in that, in the views or in the goals, I guess you could say. You have to remember that really an enlightened being doesn't have any goals, and so you're trying to, we're striving, we're working towards the goal of having no goal, which in a way is not. It doesn't look very much like other. It doesn't feel very much like other kinds of striving where you have a goal in mind. Because if you have the goal of not having any goals, I mean, it's not totally what we're reaching for, but a part of the goal is to not have any goals. That's an important part of it. So the seeking out annihilation, the seeking out the end of samsara, is not really the way. Seeking in general is not really the practical way. The Buddha did talk about seeking that which is free from death, seeking out the deathless. But practically, it doesn't involve any kind of seeking. And it involves very much more a cultivation of a state of mind that is no longer seeking. The Buddha said, no longer coming or going, And so you have to understand what the state of mind of an enlightened being is, at least intellectually, that there is no yearning for annihilation. There's just a complete freedom and independence that unenlightened people don't have. Unenlightened people are always seeking for something, even if it's just annihilation. Lots of people want to commit suicide, not because they're enlightened or even very wise, just because they wish it was over. But the distinction between what Mahasi Sayadaw is talking about when he says that the belief that when you die there's nothing, and this is he alludes to it where he says, in the first paragraph we read today, existence is annihilated without any special effort. So the goal, or not the goal, the state of an enlightened being is that indeed when they die there will be no more becoming. But that's because they put in a lot of special effort. The point being, it's not entirely wrong to say that when you die there's nothing. It's just wrong to say that if you're not enlightened. Meaning, it's not true that it's not wrong that at death there can be no further arising of the mind. There can be, with the special effort of becoming enlightened. And so it does look somewhat similar. A person who is enlightened does look somewhat similar to someone who believes that when you die there's nothing or seeks out annihilation. The similarity is in that they have no interest in the world, but it's only superficially similar. They're still yearning for it. They're averse to pain, and it's their aversion to pain and various kinds of suffering that makes them yearn for annihilation. An enlightened being doesn't have any kind of aversion to suffering. They have no stress or no flinching, no wavering in the face of suffering. They don't see it as me or mine, and so it doesn't bother them. There's one quote, I think it's Sariputta, he says, just like a worker awaiting my wage, I don't yearn for death, but I've done my work and I just wait for the payment. It will come when the time is up, when its time is up. I mean, I suppose you're looking for something a little bit more practical, like asking whether there's a problem with the dispassion or samsara. During the course of practice, you have to go through this phase, or not phase, but this shift that feels quite visceral, a sort of almost repulsion, and it can trigger repulsion, where you just see that nothing is good. Nothing is good, and therefore nothing is worth anything, and everything just seems tasteless, like eating a plate full of dust or ash. Like you sit down to eat this delicious meal of whatever good food you like, and you put it in your mouth and it turns to ash. It's a saying we have. I don't remember how you use that saying, but how it turns to ash in your mouth or something like that. Imagine if food actually turned to ash. That's kind of the state, and it can be quite, not quite, it can be somewhat disturbing and can potentially lead to horror or even despair, depression. But none of these are the path. It's just for a newcomer, we're often triggered by things that are unfamiliar. And so this new way of looking at things seems kind of wrong and when you compare it to before. But before, I found so much happiness in life, and what's wrong with me now? It can feel like, oh, something must be wrong that I feel this way. But and so there can be something that feels very much like a aversion to life and a desire or a yearning for death, yearning for annihilation. But it's mixed, that yearning can be unwholesome, or there can be yearning which is unwholesome. But a part of it is simply dispassion. And that's the part you want to key in on. Don't give any credence to the aversion. And when you hear about how someone becomes dispassionate, we often try to evoke this by encouraging aversion or encouraging the yearning for death or this kind of thing. And we feel good because it sounds like we're saying the same thing as an enlightened being is, but there's no shortcuts. You can't just evoke a feeling of revulsion to the world and think somehow that you're on the right path. That's unwholesome. Revulsion is still aversion, and it's involved with annihilation, this desire for non-becoming. You have to understand the idea of dispassion, and not just understand the idea, you really have to experience it. And to experience, you just have to practice. But through the practice, there will arise this dispassion. Try to stick to that, and don't pay any attention or don't feed the aversion that can sometimes be triggered for newcomers in the beginning. Over time, that once you catch it, and if you're not feeding that revulsion, that aversion and the yearning for annihilation, it will fade away. And there will just be this dispassion. And that ultimately it leads to something better, which is equanimity. The highest state of mind is equanimity. So maybe as an answer to your question, you can understand that if you're not equanimous, you're still not there yet. And that's the highest state. The highest state is dispassion to the point where you're equanimous. You don't really care either way. You're not wishing that things could be different, disturbed by the way things are, and you're certainly not hoping that things stay the way they are. Completely dispassionate, completely equanimous towards all things, towards all arisen things. It arises, you see it as it is, and you don't have any opinion about whether it's good or bad, better or worse. That's where we're ultimately heading on a mundane level. The mundane goal is to get to the state where you have equanimity towards all arisen things. If you understand that, then that's where that's the answer of what is wholesome and what is unwholesome. If you're still not there, then it's all then what's differentiating you from that is unwholesomeness.
Thank you, Bande.
I think that makes it so clear because, if I remember correctly, people tend to say Buddhism is about stopping rebirth, stopping existence, and it may sound true, but if you listen to it, it sounds very pessimistic, very maybe subtly pessimistic or wrong. But if you describe it as that Buddhism is about ending suffering, and that leads to the end of existence, maybe you don't have to mention the second part, but then it's a different story, I think.
I mean, it's hard to tell people this simply because they're so far from that. Most Buddhists are so far from that. I've talked about this before. It's horrific to think. But that's the whole point. It's the greatest challenge, absolutely, undeniably the greatest challenge there is. To come to terms with the Buddhist goal. And that's because it's the ultimate. It's not, oh, okay, I'll pick this up today and I'll become a Buddhist and oh yeah, I'll get there. This is the end. The end, of the universe. So most Buddhists won't get there, certainly not in this life. Many will get there eventually. But like by eventually, we mean once they get to the point where they appreciate it. Normal people, even normal Buddhists, can't appreciate it. That's the reason we don't talk about it. Not that it's calling it pessimistic is a bit of a disservice. I'm not criticizing you, but I mean, this is, yes, what people say, but it's a bit of a disservice because it misunderstands the gravity or the weight, magnitude of the Buddhist philosophy, the Buddhist religion, Buddhism. You know, it's not just another religion. It's not like you have Christianity and Hinduism and then you have Buddhism. It's on a whole other level. Buddhism is the end. And so if you're not looking for the end, it doesn't mean you can't be Buddhist. But it's like it is the end, you know, it is the way. And if you seek out goodness, this is the way. If you seek out betterment for yourself, you seek out the right way, if you seek to do what is right for yourself and for others, it is the way. It's something we have to argue about or convince people of. It's just we accept that people are ready to be better people, to better themselves, free themselves from things that cause them suffering and other people suffering, or they're not. They don't have to frame it in terms of, oh, hey, you want to do this thing that causes you to never experience anything again. It's really unfathomable and horrific, you know. But it's horrific because of what it is, because it's what we are not. We are yearning for things, yearning for experiences, yearning for these three things: for craving, for sensuality, for becoming, for non-becoming. We're yearning for these things. So most people don't even believe that that's wrong, let alone have any interest to try to free themselves from it. Those people who appreciate that it's wrong to be greedy and angry and deluded, they'll most often don't put much effort into freeing themselves from those things.
Sadhu. Thank you, Bhante.
Shall I read now?
Yes, please. Thank you, Venerable.
The above mentioned three types of craving are the origin of suffering, starting from birth up to the five aggregates of attachment, and are therefore called the truth of the origin of suffering. As to where these cravings arise and take root, the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta states, wherever in the world there are delightful and pleasurable things, there this craving arises and takes root. Here, by craving arises, is meant the actual arising of the craving because of delightful and pleasurable things. This is known as a reason defilements, pariyutthana kilesa. By taking root is meant that, failing to contemplate the impermanent nature of pleasurable things, craving for them lies dormant, taking root, and sorry, the page didn't scroll up for me.
Should I do something? Or is it not visible? Because I'm streaming if you want to see the page.
Can you hear me, Dilawar?
Yes. Hello. Hello. Hello.
I hear you, Dilawar.
I hear you.
Okay. Let's wait a moment, and if Venerable Dhammacakkappavattana doesn't respond, then maybe someone else can finish the paragraph. Ante, are you here? Okay, Edith, then you can go ahead. Should I go up again?
No, I'm going to read from This Is Known. Okay?
Okay. Yes.
This is known as a reason defilement by Rutana Kilesa. By taking root is meant that, failing to contemplate the impermanent nature of pleasurable things, craving for them lies dormant, taking root and waiting to arise whenever favorable circumstances permit. This latent craving, lying dormant in sense objects that escape contemplation, is known as latent in the object, aramana anusaya. Insight meditation eradicates this defilement. The delightful and pleasurable things from which craving arises are described elaborately in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta and may be summarized as 1. Eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind, the 6 sense doors. 2. Sights, sounds, odors, tastes, touches, and ideas, the 6 sense objects. 3. Eye consciousness, ear consciousness, etc. 6 types of consciousness. 4. 6 types of sense impressions. 6 contexts, phassa. And 5. 6 types of feeling born of sense impressions, etc.
These delightful and pleasurable things should be contemplated in the practice of meditation. Failing to recognize them as impermanent and satisfactory and not self through mindful noting will result in them becoming the breeding grounds for craving. These 2 types of craving, dormant craving for pleasurable objects, aramana nusaya tatna, which have escaped being noted as they really are, at the time of seeing, hearing, etc., and the craving that has actually arisen, pariyutthana from the pleasurable things, constitute the noble truth of the origin of suffering. This fact should be thoroughly understood and remembered.
Yeah, so just to drive home the simple point that, as the Mahasi Sayadaw says, or basically what he's saying is that A, suffering, and B, the cause of suffering, are not conceptual. They are not on the level of, you made me suffer, this made me suffer, the loss of this thing made me suffer. And the cause of my suffering is a person, a place, a thing, a circumstance, a situation, even an illness or old age. Suffering and the cause of suffering are a part of the causal chain of experiences that arise and cease at every moment. They're happening in the process of seeing and hearing and smelling and tasting and feeling and thinking. They're very much scientific, a part of reality, and very much observable, very much potential object for understanding. And that's important because people, places, and things are not. Because they're conceptual, they do not admit to investigation. Even so-called scientific truths, like scientific theories, are conceptual. You know, the let's say the theory of relativity. Let's say, I'm not saying that it's not observably accurate. It's just that it doesn't describe experience. It's on a whole other level, and that's important because as a result, it can't help us. The theory of relativity can't actually help us. As wonderful as Albert Einstein was, and as incredibly intelligent as he was, doesn't help us. Quantum physics doesn't help us. There's no mathematical theorem that can help us, no matter how accurate or observably true it can be seen to be in the physical world. None of this helps us. Not changing our situation in life. Now, of course, there are many things that can be practically useful, but they're only as a catalyst. You know, they can help us be able to help ourselves, to be able to do that which is truly useful, which is the practice of meditation. Practically, there are lots of things that are going to support the practice of meditation, even things that are banal, like traveling to Sri Lanka, or things like signing up for an at-home course on our Discord server. Some people complain about having to use Discord. They'll say, "Oh, I don't know. I'm new to Discord. I hear this a lot, or I'm not very familiar with this." Well, the answer is you better get familiar. Like, the feeling is that you can be excused because, well, it's quite useless to learn how Discord works. It's a horrific thing to think that you have to learn how to use Discord, but that's the banal truth. If you want to do our at-home course, you got to learn how Discord works. I might be making an exception for people in China because of the firewall situation, but otherwise you got to do it. And as an example, there are many things that are tangentially helpful, but the only thing that's of true value and truly allows us to free ourselves from suffering is our observation of actual experience. It's very simple. It's not easy. It's the farthest thing from easy, but it's quite simple. It's quite reasonable, It's not unreasonable, not irrational. It's not hard to appreciate, or it's not worthy of doubt or skepticism. Tell someone to pay attention to the six senses and their experiences. Actually, it should resonate with anyone who has a little bit of clarity of mind. It should feel like, wow, that sounds like a potentially the right thing to do. I don't know if it's the right thing, but I can't see anything wrong about it. They're not telling me to believe in these religious claims or anything, They're just saying, look at your experience and see it for what it is. My mindfulness is so quick to spread, It doesn't sound objectionable at all, and it isn't. It shouldn't sound objectionable because it absolutely isn't. To think that you should be mindful. I wonder if there are any people who have actually articulated arguments against being mindful. I think it's probably pretty rare compared to, arguments against Buddhism. There are many people who express criticism of Buddhism for other reasons. But against being mindful, it's hard to imagine.
Laura, should I complete the last two paragraphs?
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. I have explained the truth of the origin of suffering sufficiently, so I will end my discourse on it here. May all you good people present in this audience, by virtue of having given respectful attention to this great discourse on the turning of the Dhamma the wheel of Dhamma, be able to dispel temporarily or eradicate completely the craving otherwise called the truth of the origin of suffering by incessant contemplation, and through whatever path and fruition you have chosen, achieve speedy realization of Nibbana, the end of all suffering. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu.
So that's not the end of our text. This is just the format that Mahasi Sayadaw again gave these in a series of talks. So this is the end of that talk as it was recorded. That's a common thing to do at the end of a talk, is to express blessings. I'm not quite sure about the wording, whatever path and fruition you have chosen. It might be just a Burmese idiom or of some sort, the way monks talk, but it's probably not completely accurate in English as a translation. Incessant just means intensive, like incessant probably isn't the right word, but through diligent and systematic contemplation.
I think what Mahasi Sayadaw was referring to in terms of path and fruition is that not all the Orients may be practicing Vipassana, and some of them may be doing Samatha, as in the case in Myanmar. Burma, that could be the case, Bandi. Thank you.
I don't think so, because this is pretty standard talking about, when he says path and fruition, he's talking about Magga and Phala. There are specific terms. It's a thing that they do in Thailand as well. It's not talking about the path in terms of which meditation you choose to practice. It's more referring to which of the four stages of enlightenment. When he says whatever path and fruition you've chosen, that statement literally would mean something like choosing to be a Sotapanna, or choosing to be a Sakadagami, or choosing to be, and so he's referring to something like that. And it's possible that what he's saying is, for those of you who have made a determination to become a Sotapanna, for those of you who have determined, some of you have made a determination to become a Sakadagami, that's what it sounds like he's saying to me. But I'm skeptical that that's actually what he said. It could have instead been, it's possible, but it could have instead been whatever path or fruition is suitable for you. In other words, which one you are able to accomplish in this life. So some people in this life are able to become sotapannas. That seems more likely what he said. I'm just guessing, though. I don't really know. And that's why I say it's not clear. I don't think it's related to actual practice, because that's not how you use this pair when you say path and fruition. It's referring to the 8, the 4 paths and the 4 fruitions, the 8 types of noble people.
Understand now, Bhante. I think you're right. Thank you.
So we can stop our reading here for today and continue with part 6 next week. Thank you everyone who was reading. Thank you, Venerable Mahasi for your explanations, which I found very helpful. And I think many of the others as well. And if there are questions now or remarks you want to put into words about the reading we had today, then please feel free to just use your microphone. And now is the time for discussion and questions, and we will slowly move to the Q&A. So you can post your questions on YouTube, although we already have quite a number. And just a reminder to please keep the questions practical, maybe related to the text, which is also appropriate. And please ask sincere questions that are related to your life and have some importance to you.
Bhante, here is the first question that we have. When I try to observe my thoughts, I often get back pain. So what I do instead is notice the pain. Is it more important to observe thoughts rather than sensations? Can we just observe sensations?
Give me a second here. I'm just going to try to get up to speed. Okay, I'm here. So back pain isn't a sensation. The word sensation I would reserve for physical sensations of heat and cold and hard and soft and pressure and flaccidity. But this is called Vedana. Vedana I translate as feelings, and they're just words, so you can use what you want, but it helps to understand that there are 3 types of Vedana: painful feelings, pleasant feelings, and neutral feelings. I guess that's what you're saying when you say sensations, but let's be clear. If you use the word sensations, it can be muddied, or you start to equate them with all of the many physical sensations, which is not correct. Vedana is mental. So there are 3 types of Vedana: pain, pleasure, calm. Vedana is one of the 4 satipatthana. Citta is one of the 4 satipatthana. So both are perfectly valid objects of practice. I don't know if you've read our booklet on how to meditate, but it does, I'm pretty sure, talk about both of these. And you certainly can observe them. I mean, I think about thoughts as you really can't observe your thoughts in the sense of spending time observing them. Once you note them, they're already gone, right? So when you think, you should say to yourself, thinking, and it's already gone. If you're thinking a lot and it just keeps persisting, then you should instead note distracted. But then it's also gone, you say distracted a few times. After some time, then you're less distracted, and then you can go back to note the pain, for example. Pain, on the other hand, is something that can last, and it's something you should note. Ideally, note until it disappears. But yeah, both are perfectly proper objects of meditation.
Bhante, here is the next question. I am often sick. It is tough to meditate while I am sick. Should I do so anyway?
It is tough to meditate when you're sick. The Buddha acknowledged this. It's not so tough to be mindful. Not so tough. It is potentially a little bit tougher, but it means you might not be able to do much walking meditation, for example, when you're very sick. But, I mean, you can. Some people do. When they're sick, they will do walking meditation. Walking meditation can be good for certain types of sickness in certain instances. There is some benefit potentially to be had from walking meditation, but it can make things worse if you push too hard when you're physically ill. You have to sort of weigh that and judge for yourself what is appropriate. But you absolutely should be mindful, and there is a distinction there where you may not be able to do what we might call formal meditation. That's not really all that important. Most important is that you cultivate mindfulness, and you can do that anywhere. The Buddha said, Satincha kohang bhikkhave sabatikang vadami. Mindfulness, I tell you monks, is always useful. It's the one thing the Buddha said is always to be applied. It's never a situation where you could say, well, maybe not mindfulness, maybe something else. It's not possible. That no such situation exists. So I don't know if you've read our booklet on how to meditate. That might help you. We have an at-home meditation course, but if you're sick, chronically ill, you might have a hard time with that. Still something to consider. I have one person now who's doing the practice who started out saying that they weren't able to do much walking meditation because of their illness, but I think they're getting better at it. I suggested we talked about it and we worked something out, and I think they're able to do more walking than they did before, I'm pretty sure. I once taught a woman with multiple sclerosis how to walk. I mean, she was very, very dedicated, but she was unable to walk and eventually was able to walk quite a bit better through diligence and practicing walking meditation. She started out by just kicking her legs, lying on top of a walker and kicking her legs. That was the best she could do.
Bhante, here is the next question. If I have a strong desire to do or experience something, is it better to try it, experience it, and then gradually give it up? Or do I give it up and not experience it?
Just to be mindful. There's not really much way getting around that. Most likely you're going to engage in things that you want to engage in, and you're going to run away from things that you don't want to engage in. The more mindful you are, the less that happens. Practically speaking, that involves some amount of denying yourself of things that you desire and putting yourself in a position to have to experience things that you don't desire. So whatever you feel comfortable, it's just the important thing is that neither one of those things is going to solve your problem. It's not the solution in and of itself to put yourself in harm's way, put yourself in a position to have to experience things you don't want to experience. And it's not the solution in and of itself to deny yourself the things that you want. It can help in the beginning. They can help you to set yourself up to be able to be mindful. But ultimately you have to be mindful, which means facing head-on desires and the things that you desire and the aversion and the things that you are averse towards. But don't put too much weight on the abstention and the enduring. You have to appreciate that there's some benefit there practically, because it puts you in a position to have to face the things that you normally want to ignore or run away from or just chase after. But they're not a solution in and of themselves. They're not a replacement for being mindful. They're not anywhere near the level of actually just facing and being mindful of the experience. Understand they're just on a different level.
Bhante,
I guess another thing you can understand about that is there's nothing ever wrong about doing anything. It's the state of your mind when you do it. That's the problem. So don't be too concerned about the fact that you're doing this, because this thing that you really want to do. Focus more on the one thing, the fact that you want to do it, and noting it. But don't feel guilty or bad that, oh, I'm indulging in this thing that I want. You have to appreciate that there's no problem doing that thing. The problem is the craving and the clinging. So pay better attention, and you'll see that it's not actually a big deal. This thing that you wanted to do is not a big deal. Even if you do it mindfully, then you say, oh, that wasn't as satisfying as I thought it might be. You'll be able to see that, and this is part of growth, right? Simply appreciating that you were wrong, that this craving was irrational.
Bhante, here's the next question that we have. Is it possible to be mindful while speaking to or socially engaging with others?
Yes, it is actually possible. I can be mindful of my lips moving as I'm talking. I can even be mindful of the sound of my own voice. I can be mindful of the emotions and states of mind that I have. I can be mindful of the thoughts in my mind that give rise to the words. All of these things you can even be noting. You can be noting the movements of your lips even as your lips are moving. It is certainly possible. It's not easy because there's so much going on. There's all these things, the emotions, the thoughts, the physical. And all of these things are distracting, especially when you're talking to someone else. It's easier for me sitting here in front of a screen, but if you're talking to someone in the heat of the moment, it takes training. It's certainly possible. One woman get very angry at me because she thought it wasn't possible. I said, you can just note the feeling of your lips moving. I said, how can you note when you're talking? It's because talking isn't a real thing. Talking is a concept. There's actual experiences and realities behind it. It's not me talking, but that's what we think. We think I'm talking. If I'm talking, how can I possibly be mindful? It's not really you talking. Talking is just a sequence of experiences. It'd be quite enlightening to see that. Difficult. That's why we encourage people to stay in solitude. Much easier to be mindful when you're alone in a room than it is to be mindful when you're in a conversation with someone else.
Bhante, here is the next question that we have. I must reduce a medication. The process is mentally and physically chaotic. While meditating, can I focus on a single and specific object, for example, the stomach, so that I'm not overwhelmed?
You can. I wouldn't recommend it long term. You're not talking long term, right? You're talking about, well, it's overwhelming. It's possible to limit the things you note if you feel overwhelmed, but it's a little bit better to try and note like overwhelmed, to note the feeling of being overwhelmed. You want to get away from controlling the experience too much. Try to note the overwhelmed. There's other tricks, like when you're sitting, you can lie down if you're overwhelmed. Common thing to do. If it's just overwhelming, do some lying meditation for a while. Rising, falling is the same when you're lying. Changing postures can often help. That can sometimes help. But certainly if you're noting limited amount of things, like you try to just note the rising and falling, that's fine in the beginning. But don't rely on it. Don't get into the habit of ignoring more and more of these things and get into the knee-jerk reaction where it's too much, I'm just going to ignore it. Try and understand that eventually you want to be strong enough to face everything. And the good thing is you don't have to do anything but face it. All you have to do is face it. And what you're facing is just a moment. You don't have to face the past or the future. You just have to face this one moment, the present moment. It's here, it's now. It arises and it ceases. It's not really scary.
Bhante, here's the next question. I have problems with social media and smartphones. Regarding all the flashiness and ability to immediately be distracted, is it better to restrict their use?
Yeah, certainly it can be. Again, it's the same question as before. Don't mistake it for a solution. It's not enough to do that. If you do that and then you're very, very mindful, and it's sustainable. Eventually you just get to the point where you don't have any desire for those things. But the better, more honest solution is that when you do inevitably engage in these things, start to learn to be mindful of them. Start to learn to apply mindfulness while you're engaging, while you're partaking.
Here's the next question, Bhante. While noting, should we use very particular words for the range of thoughts? Or is it acceptable to just label all thoughts as thinking?
Yes, it is acceptable to label all thoughts as thinking. That's what they are, and it reminds you that that's all they are. Reminds you that they're happening here and now. They're just a thought. It's about the past or future, doesn't matter. It's still happening right now. It's still that whole story you have about the past or the future. All it is just thoughts.
Here's the next question, Bhante. Can we experience equanimity and still at times allow joyfulness?
I mean, asking this question is kind of a hint that you still crave for joyfulness. It sounds like what you're saying is you're afraid that if I'm equanimous, I won't have any joy. Not really true. The point is that you're equanimous towards the joy as well. So technically, it's really the answer to your question, literally as it's expressed, is that, of course, equanimity allows everything. But are you going to allow for the pain as well? Because that's true equanimity. You allow for the pleasure, you allow for the pain. You allow for everything. You don't have any partiality towards anything. It arises, it ceases. That's equanimity. But you asking this question implies something different. It implies that you're okay with equanimity as long as you can feel joy sometimes, which is not very equanimous. So you probably want to address the yearning or the fear of losing pleasure, yearning for pleasure, the fear of losing it. The idea that somehow the pleasure has some value, some intrinsic value, some satisfaction to it, which it doesn't, which it can't. Its very nature.
Bhante, here is the next question. What is your advice for dealing with anxious thoughts about the future? I practice meditation and sometimes manage to be at peace for a bit, but anxiety always comes back, and I end up with weeks of ruminating, feeling anxious, and always on the verge of tears. It's so uncomfortable. There is a real threat to my life and future due to unstable circumstances. Any advice?
There's no such thing as anxious thoughts. Thoughts are not anxious. So you intellectually you probably know that, and you're thinking, yeah, I know, I didn't mean that, but it's important because it's not. It gets muddied in the mind, and there's the idea that somehow these thoughts are part and parcel of the anxiety. In other words, you can't have these thoughts without being anxious about them, and that's not true. The thoughts aren't the problem. Thoughts about the past, thoughts about the future, they're not an issue. The issue is how we react to them. It's not even just the anxiety. It's that you don't like the anxiety as well. And the anxiety is already a problem, but then you don't like the anxiety on top of that. You don't like the thoughts, you don't like the anxiety, and it snowballs. It becomes complicated, and small problems turn into big problems, and so on. So first you have to be able to separate the thoughts from the anxiety. You also have to be able to separate out the physical consequences of anxiety, because that's not anxiety either, and it's also not a problem. Meaning, once you're anxious, then your tension in the body, headaches, butterflies in your stomach, heart beating fast. None of those things are anxiety, and none of them are a problem. They're all consequences. They're byproducts of being anxious. Be able to separate that all out so you can see clearly what's going on. And why that's especially valuable is because you'll start to see that none of it is actually all that scary. The anxiety isn't scary because it's momentary. The physical sensations aren't scary because they're, well, just physical. And the thoughts aren't scary because, well, they're just thoughts. But what is it that's scary? What is it that's a problem? The problem is the boogeyman, the problem. You talk about your life, the threat to your life and future. None of that exists. None of it is real. And if you can focus your attention on what is actually real, all of that rest of that just seems trivial. It will lose the fearfulness, and it will lose the power it has over you, the ability to trigger you and make you upset. So I don't know if you've read our booklet on how to meditate, but you have to be a little more careful in terms of how you delineate what's actually happening. That you're able to see thoughts as just thoughts, anxiety as just anxiety, the physical as just physical, disliking of all of these things as something else entirely. And you dislike them, that's a new problem. See all these things distinct, and you'll see that none of them have any meaning or significance. They just arise and cease. And then it all just breaks apart. This chain of causality that creates such stress and suffering it's like it was never even there. You can feel like it just disappeared like a mirage once you pick it apart. It's like a big knot. And you think, oh, this knot is something terrible, but actually it's just rope, just string. Once you get it all untied, you see there was no knot in the first place. It's just string all along.
Here's the next question, Bante. I have COVID, which makes practice difficult. I meditate anyway, but my mind jumps about more than usual. Should I observe the pain in my head or focus on my thoughts?
Whichever's clearest, it's all fine. Once it goes away, or after a long time, if it doesn't go away, eventually you can try to go back to the rising and falling, see if that works. If it comes back, then note it again, but all of that's fine to note. You always want to try to come back to the stomach when you're able, because it keeps you focused. It's a little bit better than just jumping around from one thing to another.
Here's the next question, Bhante. I have noticed that most of my thoughts are memory and imagination. It feels tiring having the same thoughts every day. How do I handle this?
Just keep watching, keep facing, keep noting. That's the beginning of what we call nibbida, this dispassion. You start to get tired of it. In the beginning, it's kind of an aversion. You don't like it. But if you're careful not to give in to the aversion, eventually it just becomes dispassion. Yes, it's true that these things are incessant. They're unmanageable. They're not under your control. It's not a reason to try to make them under your control or try to fix them. A reason to let them all go. Just keep facing over time and with diligence. It will grow into something very valuable, which is independent. You'll no longer be dependent on these things. You'll no longer be dependent on whether they come or don't come. Your happiness will no longer be under their power. Not be dependent on those things. It will no longer have any power over you.
Here's the next question, Bhante. Can I watch television and still cultivate mindfulness?
And while you're watching television, it's uniquely difficult to be mindful because your mind is engaged in other ways, right? You're engaged in absorbing the story of what's being told. You can try while you're watching television to be mindful. You'll find that it changes your perspective, and suddenly you realize that you're just staring at a thing that's shooting light out at you, as opposed to, watching some people do something. It's just light, that sort of thing. It'll become a lot more real about you than it is about them. So appreciate that it's difficult and that it's a very different state of mind to watch some television than it is to be mindful. But it'll be a unique experience for you if you start to try to apply mindfulness to the act of watching television. It can be a good experience, learning experience.
Here's the next question, Bhante. What is the correct way of being mindful when someone is talking, but also understanding what is being said? What about while reading?
Reading is difficult. There's a lot of information. Talking is a little bit less so. I mean, if you're listening to a lecture, then you have to take down what's being said. But the mind is pretty quick, and it can do a lot of different things in sequence. And so the time it takes to ingest information is actually not 100% of the time that you're listening. You can ingest what someone is saying and then note what they're saying, or you can note it and ingest. I mean, it happens in sequence. So there's still lots of room, actually, for being mindful and listening to someone. It can be tricky. And at times, if you're actually too dedicated to noting, you might miss what's being said. So it's not 100% possible to engage with what is being said and still contemplate the noting. Sometimes you just won't hear what the meaning of their words. But for the most part, because the mind is so quick, it's actually not as difficult as it sounds. And there is a lot of room for being mindful as well as listening. So you can note, and there's no one correct way. You note what you experience. So if you hear someone talking, you can just say hearing, hearing. You can try that with me. When I'm talking, you can say hearing, hearing, and see how it goes. You find that you can still understand what's being said and also be mindful. I mean, one of the great things about mindfulness is it increases the clarity of mind, the sharpness of mind, so it makes it easier to understand what's being said. And in fact, you could say it, you're more likely to appreciate or to ingest more of what is being said if you're mindful than if you're not. You didn't realize it, but before you were being mindful, half the time you were distracted by something else. So you didn't catch everything that was being said.
Bhante, here is the next question. I got into Buddhism to find stability and refuge, but I realized that it still depends on belief. I believe in nirvana just as a Christian believes in eternal heaven. Is there any way to verify without having to rely on faith?
Yeah, you shouldn't believe in nibbana or nirvana. You should appreciate what the Buddha taught, learn about it, and try to understand it first intellectually and then through your own investigation. It doesn't lead anywhere but nibbana. It's not like it's something that you have to believe in. It's there. It's all there. The path is there. The explanation is there. The techniques in order to realize it for yourself. There's nothing to do with faith or belief. Not at all like how a Christian believes in eternal heaven. You can't practice meditation and see eternal heaven. You can practice meditation and see nibbana. It's quite different. And you don't even have to see nibbana. You just see, oh, this is leading there. Yeah, that's where this is leading. And when you get there, you'll say, yep, that's where it led. Pretty simple. Pretty straightforward. That's the neat thing that people really don't realize. You can't appreciate that. You can understand intellectually what I'm saying, that you practice, you'll see for yourself. But it's hard, until you've experienced it, you can't appreciate it. Oh, this is actually doing something. This is actually changing the way I look at things. This is actually something I didn't see before. Like it's actually, instead of intellectually, it's not just, yeah, this is talking about how it's making me a better person by being Buddhist or something like that. It actually is doing that. It is actually changing who you are. changing how you perceive things, creating clarity where there was delusion or where there was muddiness of mind, cloudiness of mind.
Bhante, here is the next question. How can we deal with sarcastic people in daily life? It is hard to practice ignorance as we have to communicate or work together.
Should never practice ignorance. Don't ever, ever, ever practice ignorance. I don't know what you mean by practicing ignorance. If you mean by ignoring them, you shouldn't do that either. You certainly shouldn't practice ignorance, whatever that might mean. You should practice mindfulness. Sarcastic people don't exist. I mean, understand when I say that, I'm trying to get you into the frame of mind. It's not like you have to go up to them and say, look, you don't exist, or ignore them because they don't exist. Conceptually, of course they exist, but try and look at it as they don't exist. Look at it as there's the experiences, and it's your experiences that you're having. Experiences of seeing and hearing and smelling and tasting and feeling and thinking. And the problem with the sarcasm is it upsets you. You hear it and then you process it and then you get triggered by it. You dislike it. And if you learn to work through that, which is not them, it's you, it's your disliking, then sarcastic people is not a problem. I don't know if you've practiced. I don't know if you've read our booklet on how to meditate. That's a good place to start. We have an at-home course in meditation for you to train in it if you're interested. Training in mindfulness. Who could say no to mindfulness?
Bhante, here is the next question. I don't quite understand the quote. Let seeing be just seeing. Does it just mean it is impermanent? When seeing something beautiful, you still want it, cling to it, etc.
Well, you're accusing me of that? No. I mean, you're using the you in terms of, in a general sense, right? But it's not true. No. Maybe you, when you see something beautiful, want it and cling to it. You're expressing a view that that's true for everyone, and that view is wrong. And it's a huge part, it's an important part of the problem that leads us to suffering, is this idea that there's something intrinsic about a certain thing that you see that necessitates or inevitably leads to craving it. That's not true. The missing link there, the missing ingredient is ignorance. It's only with ignorance and delusion that beautiful things lead to craving, clinging and craving. Without that ignorance, in other words, if you see it clearly for what it is, in other words, impermanent, suffering, and non-self, I mean, you don't have to, that's just a description of what you'll see. When you look and you see, you'll see it's not at all a reason to be excited or happy or crave or cling. Nothing good about it at all. That's what you'll see when you look at seeing as just seeing. In other words, when you say to yourself, seeing, seeing, and you remind yourself, once you start to see the seeing as seeing, it's quite obvious, even intellectually, it's quite obvious that that should be the case. What is it about seeing that is beautiful or attractive? Just seeing.
Okay, here's the next question. I have not overcome the 5 hindrances yet, and therefore mindfulness is a mentally exhausting exercise. It requires constant effort and struggle. It's like a battle with myself. Is this normal?
In the beginning, yes, it can be quite unpleasant. But the mindfulness is not the unpleasant part. The unpleasant part is the hindrances. You get everything wrong with the hindrances. With the hindrances, they tell you to try to control, try to fix. Mindfulness isn't that. But it takes a time to learn that. It maybe helps you to understand that mindfulness isn't the problem. Mindfulness isn't stressful. It isn't taxing. Mindfulness is the most perfect and pure and peaceful way of interacting with the world. Seeing is just seeing. But it also means being mindful of the hindrances. The hindrances, that's why we note them first. Before anything else, note the hindrances. Because they're the ones that are causing you problems. If you face them and see them just for what they are, then it's a lot less stressful. But it takes time. In the beginning, it can be quite uncomfortable, unpleasant even. Don't be discouraged by difficulty. It's a mental training. You have to understand mindfulness is a training of the mind. Training is by its very nature challenging. If it wasn't challenging, it wouldn't benefit you as a training. Any kind of training is like this.
Bhante, here's the next question. I want to prepare for the worst possible outcomes that could occur in my life. If anything terrible happens to me, should I try to be mindful of the pain, the despair, and all that arises and falls?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. I guess so. I would also say, don't be too concerned about the future. Living in the future is not a great way to be. It's not going to help you be more mindful. In other words, preparing for the future, wanting to be prepared for the future is a bit of a distraction. Don't worry about the consequences of being mindful or not being mindful. Focus on the nature of being mindful and the nature of being unmindful as it exists in the present. Your encouragement to continue to be mindful should come from your observation of the nature of your mind when you're mindful. As you see that it's a good state of mind and a powerful and clear state of mind, that should be enough. So you don't have to be referencing the future. This will help me in the future, etc., etc. It's not strong enough to encourage you, to keep you going. Being mindful here and now is enough, is strong enough. It does encourage you to keep going.
The next question that we have, Bante. Could people with ADHD be good monks if they choose the monastic path? Any advice to get through daily life where executing things is hard?
Well, I mean, being a monk is about being a dedicated meditator. We're still talking about the practice of mindfulness. There's nothing about being a monk that's somehow deviating from that path. It's designed for the purpose of facilitating the practice of mindfulness. The people who are best at mindfulness are the ones with pure mind, the ones with strong mind, the ones that are like the Buddha. So a person with a mental disorder is going to be worse at mindfulness. Doesn't mean they shouldn't practice, absolutely not. And it often means that they're more encouraged, more inclined to practice. Someone with a good mind is often too lazy to practice, So, relatively speaking, if someone with a mind that is reasonably functional often is less inclined to practice, but it doesn't mean that it's better for a person or it's easier for a person who has mental problems. If you have a mental issue that you can point to, that you can recognize, like you say, I have this state that makes it harder for me. I mean, that's true for mindfulness. That's going to be true for when you practice mindfulness. Mindfulness will be more difficult. So you're technically a worse candidate, because you're asking about this, would be good monks. You're a worse candidate for being a monk simply because you're a worse candidate for meditation. Again, that doesn't mean, of course not, that you should ever stop meditating. If anything, it means that you're more likely to incline to it because you see the dangers to your mind of not being mindful, more than the person who is okay, who doesn't have those issues. But since being a monk means being a dedicated meditator, it's not going to be easy for a person with ADHD to be a monk. They're not a good candidate for being a monk. It's not to say that they shouldn't ordain, but let's be realistic that it's going to be harder for them. They're going to have a worse time. Doesn't mean they can't, and maybe through diligence and practice, they could definitely become a good monk. But appreciate what you're up against. There's no reason for me to pretend that I would never say to you, yes, it'll be a breeze. You're good because you'll appreciate the goodness of meditation. No, it's going to be harder for you. The best monks are the ones that probably don't even need ordination that much. They might be able to just become enlightened without ordaining. But they're still the best candidates for ordination because they're the best candidates for dedicating themselves to mindfulness. So simply talking about good candidate. But if you're asking, if you're acknowledging, you say, yes, I know. If what you're saying is that you know that you're a worse candidate, but the question is, could you be a good monk? Right? That's what you're asking. So maybe I've kind of deviated from what you're asking. But if you're asking a person with this thing that is going to get in the way of being a monkhood, is it still possible for them to be a good monk? It's theoretically possible, but that's the case with everyone. I can't say whether any one person is going to be a good monk. Possible, yes, but only possible because I don't know deeply enough about this person. I'm not the Buddha to be able to say what a person is capable of or not capable of. But having ADHD doesn't disqualify you from the potential of being a good monk. It just makes it, let's say, less likely that you're going to be a good monk, more likely that you're going to be a bad monk. So appreciate that, and maybe put off ordination until you're sure that you'll be able to cope with it. Any advice to get through daily life where executing things is hard? Well, difficulty is never a pertinent quality of a task. Something being difficult doesn't change whether you should or shouldn't do it, right? Shouldn't change whether you should or should do that thing. Something is worth doing, whether it's hard or not doesn't change that. If something's not worth doing, whether it's hard or not doesn't change that either. It's not worth doing, but it's the easier thing to do. It doesn't make any sense, right? It's worth doing, but it's harder. Also doesn't make any sense. So what that means is don't be discouraged by something being difficult. Yes, it's difficult. Appreciate that you've just articulated that to yourself, and appreciate that comes from a place of disliking, most likely, aversion towards that difficulty. And it'd be a lot easier if you were to free yourself from that aversion. Make sure you note the disliking of it. Whatever makes you say this is difficult. And try to start to note the experience, because it's a lot easier when you're mindful of it. Everything becomes a lot easier when you're mindful of it.
Here's the next question, Bhante. I am a beginner. I meditate only for 1 hour per day. Should I meditate formally, more frequently, and for longer?
You absolutely should if you can. I guess that's qualified by the fact that, practically speaking, you need to have a teacher, especially the more you practice. So if you're practicing a little bit, there's less concern and a little bit less of a need for a teacher. But the more you start to practice, the more urgent there is need for a teacher, because you can develop bad habits. You can start practicing incorrectly, and just in general, you won't benefit very much from it. So you'll be wasting your time if you're not getting some correction from a teacher. You're not wasting all your time, but you're wasting a portion of your time in that you're doing it incorrectly or not addressing things you should be addressing because you're not being directed or guided by a teacher. So it's not just about doing the formal meditation. You should also have guidance. If you want to do more, I mean, ultimately, the best is to find a way to do intensive practice under a teacher at a meditation center. If you can't do that, and if you don't have direct guidance from a teacher, then don't be too concerned about increasing too much. An hour a day is great. It's more than most people do, more than the vast majority of people do, more than the vast majority of Buddhists do. You're already doing great. Don't trivialize what you're already doing. But certainly go up to 2 hours a day if you on a day that you feel comfortable doing that. And just make sure that you have some contact with instruction to guide you. Maybe not daily or even weekly, but have some contact with people who can point out what you're doing wrong and help direct you towards what's right. Association with good people. The Buddha said this is integral to the spiritual life.
Bhante, we've passed the second hour, but is it okay if we can ask one more question that's left in Tier 1?
Go ahead.
The question is, Bhante, will me being mindful improve the lives of other people?
Yes, of course. Practically speaking, it's unavoidable that you're going to benefit others from being mindful. You'll benefit everyone around you. First way you benefit them is by preventing all of the bad things you might do to them. Right? If you're more mindful, you'll do less bad things, and so lots of people benefit from that. Every time you don't do a bad thing to someone else, someone has directly and undeniably benefited. But it goes deeper than that. As you start to be a better person, other people appreciate that, and it changes them in many ways, and it inclines them to take your example. It's just a huge domino effect. There's so much benefit to others. I think it's quite incredible. I mean, my family, both my mother and father have started getting interested in mindfulness. My father meditates almost every day. My mother, not so much, but she appreciates it, and she does acknowledge that it's something she could use, and she does seem interested in actually putting it into practice, which is kind of remarkable because they're so far from it. Their lives are very far from Buddhism. And it's mostly because I've been able to be a catalyst for them over the years. It started from both of them really thinking that I would gotten involved in something awful, you know. When I first got home, it just seemed like I had been brainwashed. You know, I was not dealing well with this new thing that I had found. And I didn't come across as someone who really had found something valuable, and took a long time for them to appreciate it. And because of their own ideas of right and wrong. And there's still many people who I used to know who think that I'm torturing myself, being a Buddhist, being a monk, and so on. But you will see. You can't possibly avoid seeing how much benefit other people gain from your practice. No question.
Bhante, that will conclude our session for today. I'd just like to speak for everyone that we appreciate your time as always. Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. I appreciate seeing so many people come out. We had another large gathering. It's kind of quite amazing. It's not easy. It's not easy to incline towards being here. It's not something you can get excited about, like you can get excited about sensuality. You can get excited about seeing beautiful objects, hearing pleasant sounds, smelling nice smells, tasting good food or good tastes, feeling pleasant sensations, and so on. If anything, we have these good thoughts, and there's pleasant thoughts that can entice people to come. And you remember, oh, last week I had such good thoughts as a result, good state of mind as a result of the practice, as a result of the session, as a result of taking part. But still, it's difficult. You can't think about this and say, oh, that's exciting. It's not quite exciting. So to see people coming again, coming back, is a sure sign of, it's not just the goodness of what we're doing. I mean, it is encouraging to know that we're doing something that makes people want to come back again. But it's I think it's valid to say that it's a sign of your greatness. I mean, it sounds like bragging, saying, "Oh, you're so great because you see that what we're doing is great," but it's not what we're doing. Seeing the goodness of Buddhism and helping us by partaking in this thing called Buddhism, helping us study, helping the group, working together as a group to bring Buddhism to each other and to ourselves, and to cultivate and to develop Buddhism. It takes greatness. It's hard. As I said, it's not something that people even want to be interested in. It doesn't sound enticing or interesting. It requires greatness. It requires nobility. It requires beauty of mind. It requires you to be interested in goodness, being a good person, having a pure mind, and freeing yourself from greed, anger, and delusion. It requires something. It's not to say you're better than everybody else, but it's something to be encouraged by, something we should all be encouraged by, the desire to be here, the inclination to be here. Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. Someone who loves the Dhamma is cultivated, a cultivated individual. So much appreciation for all the people who take part. Special appreciation, of course, for the volunteers, the organization, and the volunteers who make this possible. Those of you who are in front of the scenes and behind the scenes making this work. Those of you who ask the questions, publish the broadcast, organize the questions. All of the readers. So many good deeds are done just in organizing this. But of course, most importantly, the goodness of studying the Buddha's teaching, and even more importantly, practicing the Buddha's teaching. So hopefully this was a time for practice as well as study, and that we all had the chance to learn more and see more and experience more about how our own minds work, and get ourselves closer to clarity of mind that will allow us to attain peace, happiness, and freedom from suffering. So with that in mind, I would like to invoke the greatness of all of the good deeds that have been done on this day by all of us, all of the good deeds that every one of you has done in your past, in this life and in past lives, along with the power of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. The greatness of all of these things protect you from sadness and pain and sorrow and danger, from enmity and disease, from calamity and despair, loss, and all kinds of suffering. May you live long, healthy, happy lives with the strength to face whatever challenges come your way. May you be dedicated to the cultivation of goodness and the cultivation of clarity and purity and the Buddha's teaching. for the cultivation of wisdom and insight, for ultimately attaining the path, fruition, and nibbana. Sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.